Welcome to Strange Occurrences, Abnormal Tales with a Gen X twist. I'm your host, Rose Stone, also known as Ms. Riche Life on all the socials because I also talk a simply luxurious lifestyle on a budget. So if you check out my YouTube, The Riche Collective, which has everything, including my website, the Riche Life website, you can find everything from recipes to sales to this podcast, Strange Occurrences, which is also up on Spotify. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed and followed along on Pinterest, TikTok, Spotify, and YouTube. I appreciate you guys so much. And because I have all these new friends that have been watching my TikTok lives, which you can also catch on YouTube and Spotify the next day, I am going to give you today's episode, which is the strange occurrence of how strange occurrences came to be. So just a little bit of history today about me and the podcast. So here we go. I had a bunch of podcasts planned that I was flip-flopping through today, but I decided that the best thing to do would really be to truly introduce myself and strange occurrences, my love of things weird, macabre, and spooky, but with that Gen X twist, because we have some wonderful urban legends from the Gen X time that I will be sharing with all of you. And thank you to everyone who watched the longest series of my life, which was unboxing my 30-year-old vintage CD collection. But now let's go. That was a strange occurrence because most of those came from Columbia House. But let's get back to true strange occurrences and how this podcast came to be. Thank you guys so much again. I am just so excited for everyone who joins in and listens, joins my lives. It makes me so happy. So I had a previous podcast called Messy Closet, The Spiritual Journey of Generation X. And I started to get into things that were like not quite Gen X. They were way too modern. And I felt like the spiritual journey came to an end. Now, I do have some great episodes with some fantastic guests. I will be reposting probably towards the holidays when I get too busy to record. So I missed podcasting. I had about 300 followers on this app called Podbean, but I wasn't making any money on my ads. So I couldn't really afford to keep it going on that platform. So I shut it down. The spiritual journey had come to an end. Plus, I was getting confused with this podcast called The Messy Closet podcast, all about organizing. And it just was like, I don't know, people weren't really catching on to what it was supposed to be. And I was talking about all the weird, like I said, the urban legends, all of the things, the 70s, 80s, 90s, parts of the 60s, what I could look up to the best of my research knowledge, because I definitely wasn't around in the 60s. And I decided that I needed something else. I missed podcasting. I loved it so much. And Spotify, which I have had a membership with for years and years, back from my yoga and fitness teaching days, all of my playlists are still there from those days. They were offering free podcasts for anyone who had this Spotify membership. So I was like, yes, I'm going to do a podcast again. And I started to, and they had access to music. Like you could actually do entire episodes with music. And then right in the middle of all of that, they switched to Riverside, which is fantastic. I'm using them right now. But I think some of the music went away. I had to still figure out how to use this. And I was like, all right, let me just refresh, reinvent myself like Madonna and talk about the strange occurrences that I find to be interesting, because I live in a 200-year-old house that makes noises and things move, furniture moves, dishwashers go on by themselves. And who doesn't love great ghost stories? And I live in the Catskill Mountains, which is just north of the haunted Hudson Valley. And we have the famous Shanley Hotel, which is an active, owned, and operated hotel which you can go to and ghost hunt on your own, or the owner's there to help you out. You could bring in all of your own equipment and things like that. Plus, all over these mountains are sightings of what people say could be like Sasquatch. We hear sticks banging in the middle of the night here. A tree just fell over in the backyard. My husband and I were outside just sitting. And yes, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, it definitely makes noise because we heard it and we weren't supposed to be around to hear that. But I swear that this tree, you heard it crack, crack, crack. There was no chainsaw or axe that you could hear taking this tree down. And it sounded big enough that you wouldn't have been able to do it with a handsaw. And it sounded like the tree went, before it crashed to the ground. So it was kind of like the tree spirit was speaking. I also absolutely have a love of ancient history like that, and all supernatural things, ancient gods and goddesses, ancient history in and of itself, true stories that are modern and just strange and macabre, true crime. There are weird and crazy stories just from like my hometown and in and around that area of Westchester County when I was a kid, of all these different insane crimes that you would not think would happen near you, but that's what makes them so strange, because it's always the people next door. So with my love of all of this and my love of reading the strange stories in the New York Post and People magazine, Vulture, there are so many places that I get my news sources from and these stories, because they're so interesting, and if you didn't look in these places, you would never find them. I also do some blind items once in a while, but I could tell you that I don't even know half of the celebrities that are in them because I am so stuck in the Gen X past. And I'm having a ton of fun on Gen X TikTok, just, meeting new people and talking about memories. So when I think of all of these things, I think of, all of the weird little games we played too that probably opened portals to hell. Stairway to Heaven, they always said if you played it backwards, opened portals to hell. Now, we definitely played it backwards. We played the Ozzy records backwards. Anything you told us not to do, we were doing. Ouija boards with circle candles and pentagrams, yeah, we were doing it. So who knows what we opened up. We would play games like light as a feather, stiff as a board. And if you're unfamiliar with that game, it was basically like a slumber party game, but it was really, really weird and really creepy, because someone would lay flat on their back on the floor with their arms crossed over them like Dracula. And they would just lay there perfectly still, while everyone else would take their first two fingers of each hand and place it under like their shoulder, their arm, their leg. And let's say there were 7 people all together and there were 6 people with, so 12 fingers under this person. And we would chant and recite light as a feather, stiff as a board, and we would levitate this person and they would lift off the floor. I remember them lifting off the floor. We would do Ouija boards where the candles would go out and turn back on, and then we would have lights flickering all night. So, 70s and 80s kids, we were not just adventurous outside, but we were adventurous in the house with, all this supernatural stuff. And we loved ghost stories, urban legends like Bloody Mary and all of those chantings. I still can't do that in the mirror 3 times because I'm so scared of what I will see or experience. That's how much that really affected me as a kid, that at 48 years old, I'm literally still afraid to try out that urban legend. And there are just so many where this podcast can go everywhere. And I love a Gen X twist on everything, because even when I'm talking about modern things, I'm bringing it back to how different it was in the 80s, the 90s, even 20 years ago, because Gen Xers were in their late 20s, early 30s, maybe some of us in our late 30s, like 20 years ago. It's just amazing because all of like this technology has changed so much, even in just 20 years, that I could sit in my tiny little home studio bringing you a podcast, when before you would have to have some sort of like deal with the studio to be able to have a podcast at all. So there's certain things that I do love about technology, but then there's also parts of me that miss the rotary phone and the busy signal. So this is just a blend, old school nostalgia and crazy stories of those days with modern day weird anomalies and occurrences. So what I want to ask everyone out there is, if you have a story you want to share about a strange occurrence, whether you maybe think you had a run in with a Sasquatch or one of those other cryptids that are always in the urban legends, a really great ghost story. What else can we talk about? Maybe you saw some lights in the sky or had an experience. I said I've had an experience, just not ready to talk about it yet. What is a story that no one might know in the rest of the country that happened in your hometown that's creepy or strange or weird? And maybe I was inspired a little bit by Stranger Things, because let's talk about this for a second. I actually had this conversation on my Messy Closet podcast with a couple of guests from the Most Millennial podcast. So those guys are totally cool. If you want to check them out and you want to talk true millennial things, I will do my best to find that episode of Messy Closet and get that up. But we were talking about this because I was like, oh, I hope ends up on Reddit, because I have this theory about Stranger Things, how Will and Jonathan actually the writers of Stranger Things, and they are trying to tell their story of what happened to them through this outrageous show. That's just my take on it. The Duffer Brothers are Will and Jonathan. It's just what I think, what I feel. They're trying to, tell us untold stories of the 80s by making it so outrageous that it has to probably be true. Now, they have said out there in Reddit world and just TV world that Stranger Things was based off of the Montauk Monster. Now, I have seen pictures of the Montauk Monster for years, and I am a New Yorker, although I don't live in Montauk. I have been out there plenty of times, and there is an island out there that has a big building near there that supposedly does, this is all alleged, some kind of weird scientific experiments on animals, who knows what else. Again, can't say if it's true or not, but this very strange creature that looked like a beaver with a bird beak, sort of, with no hair, had washed up on the shores of Long Island, and people said that it had come, that's the rumor, that it had come from this building, this scientific lab. Who knows? It could be true. It could just be a hoax. Maybe somebody put that together. We've all only ever seen a photograph of it. But Stranger Things to me is so much more intricate. And I don't know why they would put the show based all the way out in middle America. It was like Iowa, forgive me. But if it was supposed to be Long Island, like, let's see Long Island. So I just can't make that connection. Stranger Things and the Montauk Monster kind of came from a similar place. But I do believe that maybe it's the Duffer Brothers telling us something that happened to them, very clever and ingenious way that just captures all of your attention, because those episodes are fantastic. And the reason I started watching it, ladies and gentlemen, Gen Xers, is because Winona Ryder was in it. Because I am a huge Winona Ryder fan. I love every movie she's ever done. I think I really have seen like almost all of them. And finding out that she was in this is what made me turn to Netflix and say, let's watch Stranger Things. And then 8 episodes later, I was like, wait, what day is it? What time is it? And I was hooked because they really were so detailed with everything 80s, the clothing, the hairstyles, the jewelry, even the mall with the old Gap signs and the things that we remember. Looking at it, it was almost kind of like a shock. So as I'm thinking of all of the things that I love in the world, and I'm thinking of how Stranger Things brought the 80s to, I came up with, well, I love strange occurrences, and I love the word occurrence. I don't know why. I just think it's a great word. And as I was sitting around today thinking I've got to update everything on my Spotify and on YouTube, because I have it as the Riche Collective, which was a weekly collection of strange occurrences and other stories. Well, I have to say the other thing that I love about technology, being a Gen Xer now, is any of the AI chats. Because I will sit there and think of something and I will go to, let's say, Bing Chat, and I'll type in, I'm thinking of this. Can you help me come up with all of these different things? And, it gave me a bunch of different ideas for titles. And then I just took one and put in words that represented me much better. And I came up with Strange Occurrences, Abnormal Tales with a Gen X twist. So I love that. I think that this is going to be a podcast that's going to work for me because I get to be myself. I get to talk about things that I love. I think a lot of people like strange occurrence stories. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? Who knows? I think that I'm babbling now, and I'm probably going to cut this one short. And I just really do want to thank you guys for bearing with me through, like, I don't know, 300 CDs. It was crazy. I found everything except for my Bleach CD, my Nirvana Bleach. That's the only CD I cannot find that I know I had. But if you want to go back and check those out, everything's up on Spotify and YouTube. And please be patient on YouTube. I only have the premiere episode that's still listed as Strange Occurrences up. I don't have episodes like 2 through 9 up on YouTube yet, but they are all getting there. So this Gen Xer is just so happy that, I found a nice, awesome community on TikTok where we can talk about memories and share things. And, it's funny because this is the last thing that I want to say is I see, everybody on TikTok, and the boomers don't say that they're boomers. They don't announce it. Maybe we just know, who knows? Gen X is like Gen X 65, Gen X 76. That's me. Gen X 80. Like we give our year. And then you get to the millennials and you have the older ones that are like elder millennial here. And then the younger ones that kind of just don't really say anything at all. It's so strange to me how everyone chooses, or each generation chooses to identify themselves, because you kind of see, what would I say? The soul of that generation. You kind of see Gen X doesn't define ourselves by elder and younger. We just want to know which year we were born. And elder millennials love to say that they're elder. Like, we get it, but you're not as old as us. You will be one day, but we'll still be older. But that is the strange occurrence of how Strange Occurrences came to be. I have to thank you guys so much for listening to me speak a little bit about this. If you truly have stories you want to share with me, or if you have stories that you want me to look up and research, which I absolutely love to do, please tell me in the comments, either on YouTube or on Spotify. You can leave comments on both, and I will catch you guys on the next episode. Thanks so much for everything. This is Strange Occurrences, Rose Stone, Ms. Reish Life, signing off. Find me on all the socials. Follow, comment, I follow back. I do it all. Love, peace, and hair grease.